Speaker Mike Johnson, we all know, has a background of being a committed Christian. Dude's really into Christianity and God, but now he's also Speaker of the House. And so one would think that him being a Republican, the combination of those two things should not really be a problem for him, but weirdly enough, it kind of is, because he delivered a presentation at a GOP retreat this weekend that was billed as his strategy, his map to keeping control of the House. And it went in a religious direction, not surprisingly considering who the guy is. So Johnson showed slides to the members of his elected leadership committee team in a bid to tout the party's prospects of holding on to its now just 2-seat majority in November. So Johnson attempted to rally the group by discussing moral decline in America, focusing on declining church membership and the nation's shrinking religious identity. The speaker contended that when one doesn't have God in their life, the government or state will become their guide, referring back explicitly to Bible verses. Now remember, these are all like hardcore Republicans. They're literally in the leadership of the House, but they were not into this at all. Before we continue with the story, we depend on members to keep on going. Don't wait, click join now on YouTube. One of the people said, "I'm not at church," and described Johnson's presentation as horrible. Another said, "I think what he was trying to do, but failed on the execution of it, was to try to bring us together. The sermon was so long, he couldn't bring it back to make the point." And a third person who's close to Johnson said that the speaker dipped into historical and religious points for perhaps a third of his presentation, arguing that the party needed to save the country. As that person is defensive, the others are like, dude, we pretend to be religious for the rubes. We don't want to have to hear that stuff. That to me, Francesca, is so the subtext of this. Like, that's outward facing. We care about money. Don't you understand that?
Yes. I love this so much. Like, I also think that years ago, decades ago, this wouldn't have fallen flat. That the Christian right has been much more Christian in air quotes than anything. It is just like, mask off, fully funneling money from the poor and the working people to the rich, getting your tax breaks, and then blaming brown people and black people for, I don't know, being brown and black. That's sort of the thing, right? And blaming Democrats. Like, I didn't see single thing about Hunter Biden's junk. This is boring, like that's like, talk about how Jesus was white and racist. Like, talk about how Jesus actually didn't just wanted to get that bag, get that money. like it is really funny. And he's like, but I thought, isn't this? No, bro, it's not actually anymore. Yeah. And I don't know what John, it's a tough call, because I'm old enough to remember the Iraq War, and when they were like, well, it's God that sent us, like George Bush was like, I was called by God to take all of Iraq's oil, and that was very scary. And so at least the Marjorie Greens and the Matt Gaetz and the Jim Jordans, and if you're really Christian, you might be thankful that at least they're not like claiming this anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, I often wonder, like, which is worse, the true believer or the utter hypocrite? They're both dangerous, potentially in different directions.
Exactly.
And by the way, Gary Cooper says, to fact check me on him being a committed Christian, says he's a zealot for his almost complete misunderstanding of Christianity. Oh, I don't doubt that he's selectively plucking things that make him feel good out of the Bible, but he's committed to that version of Christianity, which we can say is, a misunderstanding of the Bible, but it's also like the leading sect in American politics. So I agree with you, but that is unfortunately on the right what passes for Christianity. So yeah, I don't know, hypocrite or true believer, they're both bad. If I were an actual Christian out there amongst the right, you'd think you'd be more bothered by the hypocrites, but they seem to like Trump way more than they love Mike Johnson. And Mike Johnson is a guy who so thoroughly believes his own misunderstanding of the Bible that I'll remind you all, as Roger Harris pointed out in the YouTube chat, he's got that weird thing where like if him or his son look at porn, it texts the other, which is just so weird. But there's definitely a weird right-wing Christian element to that. So anyway, I don't know how much longer he's going to last. They don't like some of the bipartisan things that he's pursuing. They don't seem to appreciate the biggest part of his personality, which is his obsession with right-wing Christianity. So I don't see him lasting very long.